All right, so here we are. We're back.
We
Back
are
for
back, my man.
episode 3.
Yes,
It
sir.
feels like it's been
Episode number
like,
3.
I don't know, a month since we've sat down and filmed the last one. But man, I'm excited about today. Gotten some feedback from a
Yeah,
few people about some things that we can do different, some things that we can do better, and then we love that, right? Because we want to deliver the best possible podcast that we can. And if someone tells us, hey, you can share some of that stuff in an email or a text, I get it. We do like to talk, though. That's just kind of who we are.
absolutely.
But I'm glad to be back with Jason, and looking forward to this. This is a really I'm super excited about what we're going to be talking about tonight. Just super excited because I don't want to like go straight into it, but um, I just something that I try to hide more than anything, and I talk about being transparent and open and honest, and this is a topic that I don't share with a whole lot of people. So
And
yeah,
I think
man,
it's
how's
timely.
yeah.
I think it's something that a lot of people relate with. I definitely know this time of the year, as much as we glamorize the holidays and everything that goes along with it,
Yeah.
it's certainly, man, it's at peak. But so, yeah, I'm excited about it as well. Definitely, some of the feedback we've gotten, certainly we appreciate all of it. But I will tell you, if anybody out there has some good suggestions for platforms for us to utilize,
Yeah.
you can see that's kind of where our struggle is right now. We are two rednecks from New Hope, Alabama. And so technology is not high on our list.
You're
That was
dumb.
not,
Yeah.
we had some good teachers over there, but Miss Mason and Duckett and all those, they weren't teaching us how to set up anything related to podcasts. So
Yeah.
certainly give us some feedback. And yeah, man, it is good to be back with you. I missed talking with you. I've missed having a chance to run with you. I'm looking forward to having a chance to run with you this weekend, and we'll talk more about that probably next week. But yeah, it's good to be back, my brother.
Yeah, finally going to run a race with you. I get to see how bad you're going to beat me. I mean, maybe you'll hang out with me because I know that you don't have to if you don't want to. You can probably double or cut my time in half if you ran this as hard as you could. So I
Well,
don't
I tell
know.
you, I'm going to have some fun this week. For those of you who new to us, that's one of the things I do as a hobby. I love to run. And yeah, really, man, this week I'm going to run a turkey trot on Thursday. I'm going to run that 10K with you on Sunday and probably log about two or three 10-mile runs in between those. So just have a good time. But anyway, man, I'm excited to jump into it. I know that this is certainly something that's near and dear to me and you. And you talked about transparency with this, and I know that we've talked about this ourselves a lot of times. Like
Yeah.
not really even in the vein of like supporting each other through these times, but just kind of saying, hey, we both struggle with it. We'd love to help people. And then we find ourselves in this situation, and it becomes hard to really kind of put your money where your mouth is when it comes to being transparent. So we're going to
Yes.
take a leap of faith tonight. And man, why don't you just kind of jump into it with us? Let's talk
Uh,
about some things tonight.
well, I'll be honest with you. About 20 some odd years ago, I had my gallbladder removed, and you know, during that time, I I think the doctors they went. I was my first year teaching. I was teaching at Whitesburg Christian Academy. Um, my first year teaching, and during that summer, I was switching jobs from being like a 5 gallon, Crystal Mountain Water. I worked there. I would deliver those big 5 gallon bottles of water. I'd throw them over my shoulders and, you know, put them on this dolly. And anyways, I thought I'd hurt myself and got some type of hernia. I was having some pains on my right side. Um, I'm not going to go into the hernia check, but that came back good. So for
Now,
some of
which
you men
coworker
out
did
there that
that
know
for
what a
you?
hernia check is, we're not going to talk about that with the women. But that came back good, and they just couldn't find out what was wrong with me for a
Now,
while.
John, before we go much farther, I got to know which coworker gave you that hernia check.
Man, it was actually my doctor, and
Oh, okay. All right. I got that.
that's even more embarrassing and frustrating, but yeah, it wasn't a coworker, it was a doctor. So I went with this pain in my side, and I couldn't keep food down for like 4 or 5 months, and I started doing something, and I've never done this before, never really struggled with any health issues. And I started Googling stuff, and every time you Google something, it comes back. It could be the worst case scenario. I've got this, or I've got that cancer, I've got this disease. And man, my mind just started playing tricks on me. It just started playing these crazy games with me. And um, I started dealing with anxiety for the first time ever. Now, I used to be a guy that kind of, I would see someone like have a panic attack or pop some Valiums or something because they were stressed and anxious, and I'd kind of be like, you just need to have more faith or something like that, because I was kind of a legalistic Christian back in that time frame. Thought I had it all together, but I've never had it all together. And I just was like, if you have more faith, you wouldn't have so much fear, that kind of stuff. I didn't ever say it out loud, but I kind of thought it. But then I started experiencing this, and for like 4 months, they couldn't figure out exactly, what was going on with me. And I ended up having to have my gallbladder removed. But from the stress of those 3 or 4 months of not knowing and Googling and staying awake late at night, not being able to sleep, I developed some panic issues, some anxiety issues. And really, it's been something that ever since then, since I learned that I'm not invincible, like when I get really stressed out or there's a big change in my life, I deal with anxiety. And, if you're on the other side of this and you're saying, well, you just need more faith, it's not true. That's kind of the way I was about it. And struggling with this anxiety from the time that I was 23 or so till I'm 42 now, doesn't really come from a lack of faith. And I believe that it comes from trauma. I believe it comes from how I deal with stress. I believe it also comes with my serotonin levels. It comes with the chemicals in your body being out of whack and off balance. I have a low thyroid. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that your body can do. Like, I've never been the type that wanted to take medicine and stuff like that for these things. But I mean, if someone's not producing enough insulin, right, we don't look at that person and say, well, you don't really need that insulin, because they need it because their body's not producing it right. And so, yeah, I don't want to like just have this big long story, but I want to segue into what we're talking about, is that I've been struggling with anxiety off and on, when mainly in major moves or major changes in my life over the past 20 years. And it all kind of pushes the time frame back to when I dealt with the gallbladder issue, and just my mind just hyper focusing on things because of my ADHD, hyper focusing on what's actually wrong with me. And my mind still plays those games with me today. And it's been a struggle for a while. And, something I just want to get off my chest. I want to talk about it. I want to share it.
We need to talk about it because, first off, I can 100% relate with what you're talking about. I mean, I've shared some of my story with you, but I never felt like that was a real thing either. I mean, really coming up, I was somebody who I had a really strong, or I shouldn't say strong anything. I was just hard headed, to be real with you. And I just felt like, man, you get through anything. I mean, like, you just put your nose or put your head down and just keep moving forward, and you'll be fine. And then
Right.
I remember, I can remember vividly. One day I was at work. It was in Columbus, Georgia. The store number was 328. So anybody who's worked for Life Storage or Uncle Bob's, you'll know where this is at. And I went into one of my stores there, and I was there to do some performance coaching with a store manager who was a really underperforming store manager. I mean, definitely she needed this counseling. And I walked into the place, and I kid you not, man, it was like I lost all of, well, not all of, but a lot of my mental processing abilities. I started getting flushed. I started feeling like jittery. I started feeling lightheaded. All of these things taking place. I had no idea. I thought I was dying.
Yeah.
I went out to my car. I called Kim, freaking out, like thinking I'm dying. And she told me, she said, it sounds like you're having a panic attack.
Yeah.
And in that moment, it reshaped my entire perspective with how I thought about people who struggle with those things, because I was completely powerless. Now, I sat there, I talked with her for 10, 15 minutes. I was fine. I went back in, I did my day. But, as I've gotten older, those episodes have been a little bit more frequent. And, also just some of the, not even the panic attack, but just that razor's edge kind of feeling that goes
Yeah.
along with it, or just that indescribable kind of that discontentment that you just have. I mean, it's a weird thing. But one of the things I'm so glad you talked about, John, because I know you and I both, we want to talk about a lot of biblical principles. And so I want to talk a little bit about this if it's all right with you. But you mentioned that sometimes we kind of get in these situations and we start to kind of feel like, if I had more faith, I wouldn't be in this case.
Right.
And I'll be real with you, the thing that's worse than you feeling that way yourself is when you have somebody who tells you that. And there will
Yeah.
be those who will tell you, you're like, man, you just need to pray about it, brother. You just need to hand it over to God. And you're sitting there going, now, my friend, don't you think that was my first step? Like, I didn't come to you before I went to God with this thing. Like, I'm trying that. But here's what happens is it becomes this compounded destruction, right? Because
Right.
now you're facing anxiety because of everything going on. But now the devil is going to attack you in your faith and say, man, now you don't even have faith in this guy you're calling the Lord. So now we as guys, we're struggling with, well, I'm already feeling like anxiety because of everything going on. Now I feel like a failure in my walk with the Lord. And then what
Yeah.
happens is that anxiety, at least in my life, then snowballs into depression. Kind of what's kind of been your experience with that? Or, am I right? Am I
Yes.
wrong? What have you seen with that?
Well, there has been times where I've tried to lean more into my faith during some panic attacks and some episodes that I've had, and I feel like it, it made my anxiety worse.
Hmm.
Honestly, I mean, I hate to say that, and I'm not trying to say that you don't lean more into your faith, because
Sure.
I want to talk about some stuff in a minute that has worked for me, but and some things that I'm trying to, be able to refocus and reset my mind and reset my nervous system and those kind of things. But I mean, there has been times where I've been in the middle of a panic attack and I'm trying to pray and I can't get my focus off the fight or flight. When I get into a really, really stressful situation, or I'm just so stressed out that I can't handle it anymore, that fight or flight takes in, and it doesn't really matter, honestly, what you do. Like, you have to really try to just calm down, breathe, and whether you're asking the Lord to breathe in, whatever it's really hard sometimes to get away from that flight,
Yeah.
because it's just a scary situation that um, you can find yourself in. And I mean, I've been in some places where, like, I'm up pacing the house, pacing around the living room, just, my wife's trying to get me to just sit down, and where she can help me to take my focus off what I'm focused on by, like just putting her hands on me to kind of feel like, there's weight on me. I mean, I've been in some really, like, over the years, in some situations where we've moved several times. We've moved. I've never really lived away from New Hope. We packed everything up and moved to Clarksville, Tennessee back in 2009, and being in a new place, teaching in a new school, coaching football, and coaching with a guy that I love to death. But we were just spending a lot of time there, and like, man, I was stressed,
Yeah.
and that's how my body dealt with that stress. Then moving to go to seminary, from that year being in Clarksville, Tennessee, like, just life changes seem to just, my body doesn't do a good job of processing those life changes. And when things just get too crazy for me, it can turn into a panic attack, or just a few days of me dealing with, hyper focus on my situation. And I mean, I hate to say it. I hate to, because I mean, I believe that, God tells us in his word 365 times to not be afraid.
Yeah.
He says, don't be afraid. But I struggle with anxiety.
Yeah.
I struggle, and it's hard, and I hate it. I hate it. And I'm trying to find ways to, really help myself and my family when I get anxious, and when I get stressed, and when I lose my cool, when it turns into anger, and when it turns into depression. Like, I'm really trying to seek medical help, and through counseling, and seek help um, through the word as well.
Amen.
But I think that that's what we have to do, is try to find a way to climb out of it, and not just let it just overwhelm us and take control of our life.
Yeah.
And we do that sometimes. I let it completely take control of my life.
Well, you say a lot in there. That's great stuff. But, I think that when we're talking about trying to process it and move through it, before I even get into that, let me say this. For anybody who's watching this show today, and, for anybody who has, I will tell you, I know John. John's a strong guy. He's a great athlete. He's, does great things with his kids. He's great in his community. He's many of these things. Myself, I consider myself a relatively strong guy, and you would not believe the amount of strong men that I've interacted with who will privately tell me about the anxiety struggles that they have. Now, here's
Right.
one thing I will say, though. Most of us men, we're willing to talk about our struggles with anxiety when we're on the other side of that bout. Now, if
Yeah.
we're currently in that bout, like, we hold on to it a lot of times. Like, we don't mind to reveal vulnerability when it's no longer a present vulnerability. It's okay for us to be like, hey man, I've struggled with those things too. But I think that's one of the areas that we have to get in terms of addressing it and moving on, is we have to be able to rely on people in that moment. And
Yeah.
we have to be able to kind of get a support system. Now, listen, I think you and me both understand, and most people out there, when it comes to support, the Lord will certainly give you reassurance and support. I've had times when I've felt the absolute worst about myself, when I've almost been laying, prostrate in front of the Lord, and just, something come over me. I remember one time, man, I was completely down. And this song came on by Maverick City Music, and it just said, I've never been more loved than I am right now.
Oh yeah.
And in that moment, as broken as I was, as worthless as I felt, the truth of that resonated with me. But I still think it's so important that we create some type of a earthly support system. Like, the Lord does deliver, the Lord will empower. That's all true. But the reality is, sometimes I got to be able to call somebody on the phone and hear their voice.
Yes.
Sometimes I got to be able to see somebody and just be like, brother, and guys, I'm sorry if this hurts anybody's feeling, but life is kicking my ass this week. I need to be able
Yeah.
to talk with somebody, right? And so I
Yes.
think that that's a necessity when we're going to address it. Another thing that I think that, and this is more idealistic than it is always in practice. But one of the things that my dad taught me, because he struggles with anxiety as well, and he's another very strong man of the Lord, has a whole life of serving the Lord. But he's really tried to teach me that approach of really trying to be able to address certain thoughts that we have, and really to kind of take that thought captive and be able to diagnose, like, is this a thought that is being something that's coming from the Lord, or is this something that's an attack on me? And I know where this attack is. Because one of the things we also know is, in a spiritual or in a supernatural kind of a front, anytime we're about to make any type of headway for the Lord, the devil is absolutely going to attack you where he knows you're weakest. If he knows you're weakest with women, he's going to put some beautiful woman right in front of you. If he knows you're weakest with alcohol, he's going to invite you to a, whatever, but he's going to attack you where you're weak. And so we have to also be able to, kind of at times try to take captive that thought and try to be logical with illogical thoughts. Because when I'm getting a lot of anxiety, man, I start to think illogical stuff.
Yeah,
What other
that,
things do you think that, like, you can do to kind of support and work through these situations?
well, going back to what you said, some people don't like to talk about it until they're through it or after it. But on our podcast last week, um, you were talking about your mom, and you got really vulnerable talking about. And if you missed last week, or you thought that we were having too much of a chatter conversation early on, I beg you to go back and just bear with us those first few minutes and listen to Jason talk about how he's struggling with his mom, and where she's at with her battle with cancer, and he got real vulnerable, and during that time, I was triggered. I was triggered by something. I don't know if it was the fact that you're struggling because your mom is struggling. And then my mom, she's been a pretty healthy person. She's dealt with like having some stents in her heart and stuff like that, 10 or so years ago. But like, I don't know what overcome me. But last week, if you go back and watch the video, like I was playing with my headset, like I was turning my hat around. I was struggling to
Mhm.
finish that podcast last week. I don't know what I was triggered from, but I was anxious from about the end of that conversation about your mom until we got off. And I think I even told you when we got off, I was like, dude, I felt like I was having a little bit of a panic, attack there because I was triggered by that conversation. And, it helped me that I was able to talk to you about it right then. But like you said, we have to, when we enter in to a stressful, like where things are going to be stressful, and we know that those things have done some things to our anxiety or to our stress levels in the past, we have to reach out to people. We
Yeah.
have to talk to people before it gets to a point to where we're just basically in the quicksand, throwing our arms up in the air, hoping that somehow, some way, you can pull me out of it. Like
Yeah.
when I step my right foot in that quicksand, that's when I need to be like Jason. Like, dude, I just stepped into this quicksand. Um, I don't know how long I'm going to be here. I don't know how long my foot's going to be here or how long I'm going to be in this place, but I need you to know that I'm going to need someone to help me get through this. And and women, there's women that are, giving me feedback that are watching us, like they do the same thing. Like
Sure.
they will get so deep in the deep end of, drowning that, you know, before they reach out for someone to throw them some type of ring, a life ring, to pull them out. And I just I want people to understand that you need that community. You need those people in your life that you can call or text and say, hey, um, you know, we're entering it could be a money issue, it could be a new job, it could be you hate your job, whatever it is, but you're about to walk through something, um, and you really could use someone on the other side to just be that support for you. Um, when things start to get a little wonky, as you say,
Yeah.
I just hope that people realize this as we're talking about it, that this is real stuff. And most of the people that are hearing this have dealt with some type of anxiety or some type of stress that they need to deal with before it turns into anxiety can look like you yelling at your family. That's anxiety, losing
Yeah.
pardon my French, losing your shit on your family. And I've done that, like, and anxious and scared. And I got kids, 3 kids, 7, 9, and 11, and they get loud, and I'm anxious and stressed, and they're just having a good time, but loud. And someone starts crying or gets hurt or something, I just lose it.
Oh yeah.
I just lose it.
Oh
And
yeah.
and that's because I haven't dealt with what I'm, going through on the front end, and try to give myself a life vest to get myself out of it.
And I want to say one thing real quick. You're still a great dad when we lose our stuff on it. When we
Yeah,
lose our mind on our kids, like that doesn't make us bad dads. I know sometimes, man, we do some crazy things like as dads, and like you kind of beat yourself up after the fact.
oh yeah,
And the reality is, like, I mean, we have all, and our dads failed and their dads failed. And like, I think that's one of the things as us guys is we really have to learn how to give ourselves a little bit of grace. I mean, realistically, we still have this just bred mentality that says we have to do so much. You have to be this great provider, you have to be this engaged dad, you need to be active in the church, you need to be physically active, you need to, all of these things, man. And then when we kind of fall short at anything, we like identify where we fall short and we do a great job of doing it. And like, that's one thing, guys, like, and women and anybody listening to this is like, if you fail, when you fail, like all that does is reinforce the fact that you're made like every other person out there. And
right.
so that is an area that like I think that we as men, and of course, ladies, I do not mean to exclude anybody. But I know we as men, we really, I think that like if I see you struggling, John, I'm more than able to have compassion in my heart and want to check on you and make sure everything's good with you. But man, if I'm struggling personally, I look myself in the mirror and I go, "Come on, man, what's wrong with you?" You know what I mean?
Right.
And so we've got to change that. Um, I know that I think you got a couple Bible verses to point at us here in just a minute,
Well,
but go
what
ahead.
you just said,
Yeah,
like, basically we're all going to fail. Like, we're
yeah,
going to fail as fathers, we're going to fail as dudes, we're going to fail as believers, as delivered believers, the 3Ds,
yeah,
dudes, dads, dudes that are delivered. Like, but I think this book right here we both have is something that we can talk about on another day, that talks about, like you said, that Maverick City song, I've never been more loved than I am right now. Like, just the story of the prodigal son. Like,
mhm,
man, there is nobody harder on me than me. Nobody. I am so hard on myself. All right. Because I want to be a great dad. I want to be a great husband. All right. I want to be these things. But one thing that I do when I do mess up is I'm quick to go to my kids and say, man, I am so sorry. What I did now, what you did, you shouldn't have done.
sure,
But I'm so sorry that I reacted the way that I reacted, because I am in control of me. You're in control of you. Now, you didn't do what I asked you to do, and I shouldn't have been an ass. All right. But being quick to go to my kids and being quick to go to my wife, it has taken me years, because I've, like, the pride that I've had to swallow to do those things. So, yes, I really believe that, yeah, we do not have it all together, men, women. And as long as you're quick to swallow your pride and admit that you don't have it all together and repair those things, those bad decisions, that's when you're going to feel the freedom of, you know, I've never been more loved than I am right now. You got to trust those things too. But yeah. So what you just said about dealing with some things that I've read this week that have, you know, I've tried to put some things together to help me really deal, because now I'm in this place in my life right now where I've been like trying to figure out. I left education, got a master's degree, spent time in ministry. Some things happened at the church that I was pastoring. I don't want to go into those details on this show, on this podcast, but like, you know, we've spent 4 or 5 years trying to heal from some things. And I'm back. I've been back into education for the last 4 or so years, but you know, I'm at a great school right now. Like the principal, she is amazing. Like the best, one of the best leaders I've ever worked for. She is an absolute phenomenal person to work for. She's
awesome.
straight across the board, keeps everyone in line, you know, doesn't treat anyone different than others. And, you know, everybody's treated fairly, but everybody's disciplined. There's nobody squeaking through. And then so is my assistant principal. Great guy. I love it. The staff's amazing. I have worked at some schools the past few years that were a little bit you know, one of where Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus went to. I've worked there. But I still don't feel that my calling is to teach middle schoolers. So I've been struggling with these thoughts and anxiety of like, well, I get a good paycheck being a teacher, and it's consistent, but is that me just kind of holding on to a security blanket? And, you know, so just kind of dealing with some anxiety over the last few weeks and some blood pressure issues, and, you know, really trying to battle that. I've come across some things. I looked at what Paul said to us about not being anxious, but he said in Philippians 4, he said, be anxious for nothing. So it's kind of like what you said at the beginning. You hear people say, well, man, just pray about it. Right? That he's telling us to be anxious for nothing. So basically he's saying, hey man, don't be anxious. Okay. Don't be anxious.
All right, I'm done.
Okay. All right. Hey, no problem. Okay.
Checking
Good
out
talk,
anxious.
buddy. Paul, great talk, but I'm fixing to walk out this door and I'm good now. No more. I'm not anxious anymore. And it don't work that way. Like you can't tell me to stop breathing.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I mean, you could probably
make somebody quit breathing.
Stop breathing, but you can't tell me to just, you can't tell my mind to stop thinking. Yeah. You can't tell my mind. Now you can point it like what you said, take every thought captive. You know, make sure that what you're allowing to come in is truth. And, you know, you can do that, but it is so hard when you're hyper focused on stuff that's causing this anxiety for you to just say, okay, I'm done. You're right. I'll just let it go. But he says, be anxious for nothing. And that's kind of like his don't do this. But then he adds, but in everything, by prayer, by supplication, and with thanksgiving, let your request be made known to God. I can't even read. But when I look at that, I see him telling me not to be anxious, but I need to replace it. Like he doesn't just say, don't do this, but he gives me a prescription.
Yeah.
He says, right. Here, if you're going to be anxious, I don't want you to, but here's a way to help you not be anxious. So in everything, by prayer. Now, again, I hope there are people that are listening to us, you know, that they may not have faith, and that's fine. And you don't pray to a God in heaven, and you may not believe there's a God in heaven, but are you talking to someone about it? Are you sharing that with someone? Like me, I'm going to do my best to pray. And, you know, sometimes I'll struggle, like, God, are you listening to me? But are you talking to someone about those struggles, about those anxieties, you know? And I'm going to pray to my God, and hopefully he's going to hear my prayer. And I know he does, but I'm reaching out to someone. I'm going to tell you about it. All right. I'm going to talk to my wife about some of these things, but it says by prayer, and I'm just looking at the word casting, and where we see it says to cast all your cares on Christ. All right. So cares there is like me taking the stuff that is really just splitting my mind from the truth. All right. Taking that stuff, and I look at it like not playing catch, because if me and you play catch, you're going to throw the ball back, right?
That's right.
That's what I do a lot of times. I say, here you go, God.
I throw it back.
I'll throw it to him,
Yeah.
but he's not going to throw it back to me. I'm going to run up to him and get it. I'm going to give that ball back.
You
That's
throw
my
the
ball.
boomerang. Yeah.
All right. So I'm supposed to cast all my cares on him, almost like I'm skipping a rock across
That's right.
the water, and it's going to skip, and then it's going to sink to the bottom, and I'm just supposed to leave
Never
it.
see it again.
But that's my struggle, though, man. I'll skip that rock, and I'll pull my pants legs up and take my shirt off, and I'll run into the water and try to find that rock.
Yeah, that's your favorite
And
rock, man.
if we don't drop those cares off to him, the things that divide our minds, then we're not really giving it to him.
Yeah.
We're just kind of, saying, hey, these are my problems, God, but I don't trust that you can fix them. Now, there are some things that I have to do. Like, there's been some times that I've been, on some medicines and stuff like that, that I really, because there's a chemical imbalance in my body, and heaven forbid, don't stop taking your medicine.
Oh no.
Because I'm telling you, this is the prescription, because that could be part of the prescription too, because our bodies do have chemical imbalances.
And also, I think there's a lot of science that proves other aspects. Like when we're talking about getting through this, now certainly there's a biblical aspect to it, and I believe fully in that. And then there's a clinical aspect to it. And in a lot of cases, that clinical aspect is going to include some form of medication. And I'm thankful that the Lord has endowed these doctors with the knowledge and ability to create things that can address chemical imbalance. I can assure you, if they had these in the Roman days, they would have used them. I mean, if this isn't just something that, we're using because we're hedonist, it's because it's a benefit. The second thing with that, we've talked a lot about it, is creating that support group, right? With having that support group, whether that's a spouse, whether that's a friend, whether that's a counselor, whether that's a pastor, whoever it is, but somebody that you have confidence in, that you're able to be vulnerable with. A third side of this is, though, creating more discipline. And sometimes that seems a little counterintuitive, but a lot of times when we're going through this, what happens is our discipline breaks down, and the things that can deliver us come kind of from a mental standpoint. Like for me, it's running, it's working out, it's things like this. I will tell you, when I get in those times, I don't want to do those things. But by not doing those things, I stay in it longer. And so, from a clinical standpoint, we have to lean into your discipline at that point in time. And so, understand that, like, what we're talking about here is, like, we're not saying this is a replacement, but it is a true peace that can be just given through that prayer that you have with the Lord. I certainly know one thing about the God that we both serve. And that we have had experience with, and that is that we serve the God of the broken heart, man, 100%. Like when you go to the Lord with a broken heart, He hears that prayer in a way. I don't even know. It's like, man, it gets you to the front of the line, And so I think that being able to have a balance between what we need to do in our physical bodies and what we need to do in our spiritual bodies, it's a blend. It's not do one or the other. The Lord wants us to have fulfillment and wellness all the way around. So yeah, man.
That's where the supplication comes in, after prayer. Like supplication is basically us being broken and just crying out, like just crying out. I mean, Jesus tells a parable of a lady that was sick, and she wanted to be healed. And in this parable, this lady just cried out and cried out and cried out and cried out, finally, until it was like, you know what? Leave me alone. I'm going to heal you.
Yeah.
It was a parable. All right. So it was, God or Jesus was just saying that he wants us to just cry out to him. All right. And he hears us. All
Yeah.
right. But a lot of times we learn like he's going to do something through those times in our lives. Like I met with a good friend of mine this week who does a lot of counseling, who does a lot of speaking. His name is Bruce Martin. He's a gifted counselor, former pastor. He does a lot of speaking engagements and stuff now. But he said something that I wrote down, and he said suffering always leads to God's glory.
Mm.
So I'm suffering when I'm anxious, like because it's suffering for me. It's hell on earth. Sometimes it's like I can't wait to get to heaven so I don't ever have to be anxious again. But suffering always leads to God's glory. Glory as the brilliance of God displayed in our lives. So glory is the brilliance of God displayed in our lives due to suffering. So there's glory coming when we suffer. There's glory coming.
Mhm.
I just struggle with that because I want to see the crystal ball. You know, I want to see it now.
Yeah.
And, we have to suffer. We have to be in supplication where we're before him crying out, screaming out day and night, day and night. Hear me, Lord. I need you. I need your
Amen.
help. And
Amen.
then finally, he says with thanksgiving, you know, the best thing for me is to start thinking about the things that I'm blessed, I've been blessed with, like my wife and my kids and my job. Like, I mean, even though I don't feel the fulfillment there that I believe that I'm called to do, I still like I'm blessed. I'm
Amen.
super blessed.
Amen.
And when I get up in the morning and I turn on worship music and I start singing in the shower, and hopefully nobody hears me because it's terrible.
I'm sure.
But I'm praising him. I'm thanking him. And I feel like that through those things, I have better days, than when I don't do those things.
Yeah.
And if I'm more
Absolutely.
consistent with it, it's just like anything else. The consistency will you will see you will see the healing in the consistency. You will see the change in the consistency. I mean, you can't run a marathon without training for a 10K first and then training for a half, and then like you just can't do it.
Possible.
So you got to be consistent to reach what you're trying to seek the Lord for. And yeah, I mean, so what do you got there?
Well, the last thing I really want to just say is, one of the things that I think that we have to understand with anxiety also is that deliverance that we get from that is not going to be a everlasting furthermore deliverance. I know that I go through anxiety, I get through it, I go through it again, and a lot of times I kind of sit in that comfort, or I kind of have that mind frame of, Lord, why won't you deliver me from this? And I think a lot of the times the Lord says, well, I have, like I've gotten you to this point. You've been delivered. And it's a
Right.
great reminder, how in the word it says that his mercies are new every day, right? And so realistically, we can't have this mindset that says, I'm going to do these things right. I'm going to create the support group. I'm going to, the whole list of things we've gone through, and then I'm just going to be free of this stuff, right? This is a lifetime. Like, this is something that we are going to have as long as we're in this earthly body. We're going to battle this. And so understand that, going to the Lord and going to your friends and all this, it's not a one-time solution. And so
Right.
you have to feel comfortable in doing this as the need arrives. We talked about medication, and sometimes it says take as needed. And a lot of times I think that's how it's going to be with this. We're going to have the times where we really struggle. But the great thing is that we do serve a mountaintop God and a valley God.
Really good.
And, one of my favorite scriptures that I love, and it says, and I am convinced that nothing can ever separate us from God's love. Neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor demons, nor our fears for today, nor our worries about tomorrow. not even the powers of hell can separate us from God's love. And so realistically, going back to that, what we talked about, I've never been more loved. Guys, as we're going through this and you feel that sometimes you don't even love yourself, I think it's very valuable to remember that there's nothing that you can do. There's no mistake you can make. There's no hate you can have for yourself. There's no tripping or falling that can be done that can ever separate you from God's love. And I tell you, man, that in and of itself is something to be very excited about. So that's all I have, John. You want to finish us up with anything?
I see like a mic drop right there. Is this like a legit mic drop? Boom. Yeah, I mean
I
that's
think
just good
so.
stuff. I mean, seriously. Yeah, I hope this turns into be a very helpful podcast, just for people that are struggling and in this area, because I know that most people are affected in some way or another, whether they want to admit it or not. And you can always you can shoot Jason a message on. You can friend us. You can follow us. Follow his YouTube page. Drop some. If you want to talk to someone and you don't have that person to talk to, I mean, I'm up for listening. If you don't have that person, but find that person. Try to find that person or people that you can pour yourself out to, even though it sounds like that's not what men are supposed to do. I don't want let the world lie to you,
Yeah.
because it's a lie that you don't need community. You were created by a God that created you for community. So, whether you believe that or not, you know that when you're around others and you're in community, that things are different. So, anyways, it's been a long one.
Absolutely, man.
I hope everybody
It
finishes
has, but
it.
it's been a good one. Yeah, I
All right, man.
appreciate everybody sticking with us. Certainly, like John said, we appreciate the feedback, and we look forward to seeing you all again next week. Happy Thanksgiving,
Happy
John, to
Thanksgiving.
you and your family, and
Roll
I'm
Tide.
sure we roll tide, brother. We'll talk with you soon.
All right.
All right, man. Bye.
Adios.